Yes, a very good morning and many thanks for staying with us right here on the #1 TV station in the country of the world, if you will, and TV Uganda. My name is Rome Busiku, and of course I come to you yet again with another pertinent conversation, and this time round we'd like to focus on tackling poverty and also vulnerability in the Acholi sub-region. And this conversation is brought to you by the ADRA Foundation Uganda, that is the Adventist Development and Relief Agency Uganda, right here on NTV Uganda. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. And of course, in studio with me, I do have Mr. James Bisheko. He is the Livelihood Program Officer with ADRA Uganda. On Zoom, we shall be joined by Mr. Ogwang Hudson. He is the Program Coordinator for the ADRA Uganda. And actually, he's going to be talking to us about the SCALE program. That is the Social Change and Livelihood Enhancement Program under ADRA Uganda. But first off, what is ADRA? Very good morning. Mr. Bisheko, what is ADRA Uganda?
Good morning, thank you, NTV.
Indeed.
ADRA Uganda, that's an abbreviation, as you put it, Adventist Development and Relief Agency in full, and it's an organization founded by the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
I see.
We do happen to operate in 118 countries. In Uganda, we started in 1986. And so we've been here for that long, serving communities that are in need. As our name goes, we are having development and relief services.
I see.
And today, of course, I will focus a lot on the development part of it. But we work with refugees in Uganda quite a lot, in partnership with government and the UN agencies.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well, COVID-19 has caused a lot of distress to so many people right here in Uganda. But for some, it has not been COVID-19 alone. It has been 20 years of war of the LRA rebels in that regard. The insurgency that has actually affected many of the people within northern Uganda. Before many people could cry about COVID-19, they were still crying about the effects of that war. But you are there as ADRA Uganda implementing the SCALE program. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, certainly with our focus on the most vulnerable in our society, it was a big challenge for us to even stop or even think about having a hold onto our programming, which people want so badly. And so, first of all, we had to make sure that we are able to stay on course. First of all, safeguard the staff, but also make sure the communities we work with are safe. So we had to veer off a little bit and also initiate programs for COVID-19, help our communities to cope, sensitize them, working with local governments to observe the SOPs as we operate, because we engage with the communities quite extensively. But of course, part of the effect was on the school programming, because we are promoting education in various areas of this country, and that also affected us a lot. But I should tell you that it was very interesting that the communities remained active.
I see.
Even then, doing part of what they should do, including feeding children who they were feeding in school. When the schools were open, they continued to grow the food and take them to their homes and feed their children through our school feeding program.
Indeed. How has the pandemic itself affected your operations as ADRA Uganda?
Yeah, certainly our movements were cut off a little bit, scaled down, and then we had to use now technology to be able to communicate more regularly, and only staff that needed to move had to move. But we kept in touch with our communities through various structures that we already set up. We work with organized communities and local government officials, and so without going down on the ground, activities continued because people are in charge of what they are doing.
So in northern Uganda, you are focusing on the psychosocial support of these victims of 2 decades of war. Talk to me about that. How are you actually reaching out to them?
In northern Uganda, and to be particular in the Acholi sub-region, where the SCALE program is that you just introduced, we are looking at 3 areas, and ADRA generally operates with a triangle of well-being. And when we talk about the triangle of well-being, we are talking about 3 important aspects of a human being that must be handled or enabled for the person to live a better life.
I see.
And that is education, sustainable livelihoods, and health. So we work with the triangle of well-being, and so those are the areas on which we focus in the north, where there has been a war for 20 years, as you have rightly put it. And we also now apply our other approach where we are looking at another triangle, and this is a triangle of change, and we talk about capacity building of communities that have been affected.
I see.
We talk about advocacy so that they can speak for themselves, and then we also talk about sustainable livelihood support, where we give also inputs to people that are in need.
All right, let's talk about access to education in these 3 districts where you've been. That is Agago, that is Kitgum, and also Pader. What are the levels of education retention within these areas, or enrollment for education, vis-a-vis, you know, the COVID-19 pandemic before its track, and right now as we are knee-deep in mire in the COVID-19 pandemic? Give us variations in the levels of education.
Our program started in 2013.
2013, before the pandemic.
Yes, that was in Pader, Agago, and Kitgum. And now, as I speak, our baseline showed that only about 40% of children who are meant to be in school were in school. But by the time the pandemic hit, we were already at 58% of children being in school because of our mobilization skills, working with organized communities.
This is around 2019.
Yes,
it was
right.
Enrollment was around 58%.
58%.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and we do support school feeding. One of the things that keep children in school and active is how do they feed. And of course, myself, having grown up in rural areas where feeding in school is a luxury.
I see.
And in these communities, yes, it was a challenge, but ADRA had to initiate a school feeding program where actually the people themselves, the parents themselves are organized, and they work with the school communities, they work with school management committees. The school management committees provide land, and the parents literally go in this land and they plant food, which food is used to feed their children in school.
When you say that most of the young children have been retained in the education system simply because of the school feeding program that you are implementing, does that mean that so many of the young children are dropping out simply because they do not have food to eat at school?
Yeah, that has been our experience, not only in Acholi sub-region, but
that is also, the 42%.
Also in Karamoja. Yeah, when children are not fed in school, their retention is less, and also their capacity to learn, especially in the afternoon program, is very limited.
Indeed, you can't learn on an empty stomach.
Yeah, certainly, and they are competing with the children in Kampala and all these high-end areas who actually feed. They have 3 meals a day.
What about the issue of sanitary towels? Does it come around as a challenge that is leading to so many of the school dropouts within the areas of Pader, Agago, and Kitgum?
Sure, that has been another challenge.
I see.
And we are working with the school management committees to improve in that area as well. And we have also worked with some of the community-based organizations to actually produce reusable sanitary towels for some of the girls. And this is an area we want to go in a big way after this pandemic.
Besides sanitary towels, you know, basic amenities, if you will, feeding, what other challenges are children grappling with that are leading to so many of the school dropouts that we are seeing within the country?
Well, our cultural setup sometimes is also a challenge.
Cultural norms?
Yes.
How so?
And the children are not so motivated to be in school, and partly because the parents are not giving them that support from home. So what we are doing now is to work with the mobilization structures that are there, the local government, the cultural leaders, the religious leaders in the community, to mobilize people and also talk about rights of children, the right to education, for example. And I should say that it has been a combination of a number of these strategies to have our enrollment and retention raised at that level, at least in these 3 districts where we're operating currently.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and of course, early teenage pregnancies have been another problem in that area. And the other issue is a gender-related.
So you're saying even the social norms are leading to the skyrocket in teenage pregnancies?
Yeah, sure. And of course...
How so?
And of course, these communities having been really affected by the war and not so much engaged in community, development activities. They have no businesses running and so forth. There's more time, more social leisure time, and the control of parents over these children has been an issue.
I see.
But of course, like I said, also issues of rights.
So you're saying the effects of the pandemic that we were seeing on our young children, like many getting pregnant and so forth, others being married off at an early age, such factors have been prevalent within northern Uganda, at least for the last 2 decades.
That is for sure, because there was nothing much to occupy them. A lot of our efforts were on emergency relief.
I see.
And so education and all these development aspects were on the lower end. So with this development nexus, where we are now shifted to development work, now we are focused on how do we build communities. First of all, the parents to support their children in school, talk about the school feeding, talk about the role of religious leaders and cultural leaders in mobilizing, and also the community itself to gain confidence and engage government on the quality of education that they are getting.
All right. What else are you doing to boost retention levels of our children within the school system?
Well, we have now supported also households. We work with the community-based organizations, and especially women, having about 70% of presence in these groups.
Yes, James.
And so we train them livelihood skills, for example. They choose what can we do in this community, how can we live a better life. They choose a business they want to do, a crop they want to grow, and we support them, link them with service providers in the district, extension service, for example, and they are trained. And then they are given basic inputs to get started with their businesses, either as a group or as members of the group, 30 normally in number. And we are already working with 54 community-based organizations. Now, a community-based organization has members, which members are at the point of improving their household incomes. And so if people are strong at home, certainly they are going to support their children in school. So we are looking at that capacity of households to be able to support their children in school, because they need to have books, they need to have uniform and all this stuff.
And of course you're doing the most, because at the end of the day you're going to help them, you know, boost their capacity to till their agricultural fields, and in the end they're going to be getting this food all the way to the school system, and in turn they're going to be feeding our children in that regard, and shall be doing away with food insecurity. Let's talk about what you are doing to improve their lives, development initiatives that you've worked on as ADRA within this area. We've talked about the issue of education. Let's get to livelihood enhancement programs within these 3 districts.
Yeah, the livelihoods have been more around agriculture, because most of these communities are living on land. And so how can they do what they are doing better to get better returns on their investment?
Indeed.
And so we have had groups actually producing more sim-sim, for example. Sim-sim, for example, and they are able even to process, go through the value chain activities and improve the quality of what they are taking on the market. And then they have village savings and loan associations. That's another program that improves their literacy skills. And then they are able now to also get loans, invest in their small gardens, invest in their processing units for sim-sim, for example, and then they are able to now sell on a large scale. And I can say that communities are now in charge. Where we are working and the communities we are working with, at least we are informed that close to 99% of their children are able to be in school. Yeah.
All right. That is Mr. James Bisheko. He is the Livelihoods Officer working with the Adventist Development and also Relief Agency. We also do have Mr. Hudson Ogwang, the Program Coordinator for the same organization, but is also implementing the SCALE program. That is the Socio Change and Livelihood Enhancement Program. We shall be reaching out to him via Zoom later on. We are still fixing that connection in that regard. Let's continue, Mr. James Bisheko. What are some of those achievements of this program within these northern regions, the 3 districts?
Yeah, if I should really focus, I would like to talk about health. We talked about the triangle.
Education, livelihoods, enhancement, now health.
Now health.
Indeed.
The communities certainly are in position to engage government on accessibility of these services. And I should say that in Padel, for example, 2 health centers have been constructed because the community asked.
That is amazing.
They engaged government through community dialogue meetings and what we also call the barazas. So the community, through the CBOs I talked about, are able to identify this is an issue for us. We cannot be walking 13 kilometers to look for a health center when actually it is possible for us to have a health center. So two health centers have been constructed, and roads linking to these health centers. In one particular community in Lotang, in Padel, they were able to construct, the local government was able to put up, open a road 13 kilometers to the health center. And this is amazing how the community is able to engage with their government on issues that actually are affecting them. So the dialogue is on. The people are no longer just on the receiving end. They are actually driving what is coming to their communities. And to us, this is a big shift from receiving syndrome or handout syndrome to now feeling we are in charge. We need this service, we need this service.
All right.
That is important.
All right, let's also hear it from Mr. Ogwang Hudson, who is reaching us, from northern Uganda. Very good morning, Mr. Ogwang Hudson. Can you hear us? Talk to me, Ogwang. I can't hear you. Can you hear us live from the studio, Mr. Ogwang Hudson?
I can hear you, but I think I'm not able to hear me.
Talk to us about the SCALE program, the Socio Change and Livelihood Enhancement Program. What is it about? All right, the IT team shall continue fixing. Well, like we did mention, internet penetration in this country is really unique, and those are some of the challenges we are grappling with as we get onto these technological advancements. And in that regard, we shall get back to Mr. Ogwang later on. He is in Padey district. You do know internet is a very, very big problem in that area of the country, especially all rural areas. We are still here in the studio with Mr. James Bisheko. Mr. James Bisheko, let's continue with this conversation on the key achievements being, boasted about by ADRA as a result of your interventions within Pader, Kitgum, and also Agago. Empowerment has increased. Non-confrontational dialogue has also increased.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, we use community for social change tools. For example, community dialogue meetings I just talked about, music, dance, and drama, to be able to pass on a message to the duty bearers. And so, with the organized communities in terms of CBOs, in terms of local leaders, in terms of cultural leaders, a chief in Padel, for example, when he speaks, people will listen. For example, talk about issues to do with gender. How do we empower the female gender? I visited Acholi sub-region. My first time was in 2015. And I got to know that, for example, a woman is not, and traditionally is not expected to own assets. For example, you couldn't own a cow, could not buy, say, a car or build a house, and it is in their names. And that was very challenging for me to listen to, that that's how the situation has been. And then also, if a woman gave birth to only, say, girls, it was very difficult for this woman to stay in the home in case the husband died. Or does not have so much access to resources because she gave birth to girls. That was very striking for me.
I see.
But we started now to engage the power centers. And these are the cultural leaders, for example, because they are respected in society, and they are the custodians of culture and all these norms we are talking about. And then we started also engaging religious leaders who have been on the forefront as well with peace building and reconciliation. And we're like, how do we push them now to development? And that has worked. They come on the fore and they speak about these things. The cultural leaders are talking about the girl must be in school. And incidentally, when now the woman has been empowered, it's also raising another challenge.
There are fights in the household, power play.
Yeah, sure. There is now, we are having a bit of a challenge. Even enrollment I talked about, we have more boys in the schools than the girls.
Why is that? The girls got married off at an early age? They got pregnant?
Well, the point is that the focus has been on the girl child to go to school.
I see.
And then all of us have been looking at that. And then now the challenge is, okay, you have empowered more girls, you have empowered more women. I just talked about the community groups which are involved in development that we are supporting. 70% of those are actually women.
Indeed.
And so the men now are coming up and saying, you have disempowered us. Now, that's a rising challenge. And now we are also trying to see, okay, how do we balance up the boat, as they say, to make sure we are no longer looking at just the...
But we need to just set the record straight to the men out there. Empowering women doesn't mean that we are trying to disempower the men or even take away all your rights. No, 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 no. It's just simply to tell you that we need to empower women, put them in a greater position to actually make important decisions that actually concern their own lives. It is one thing for a man to make a decision for a woman. It's another for her, you know, to make a decision that is going to impact her own life, on her own, without your own input. That's what we talk about when we say empowering women. It's not to take away your powers. Go ahead, James.
And that is extremely very correct, because at the end of the day, when you empower a woman, what she gets, what she earns, she's supporting the household. Even men are benefiting quite a lot, because we have seen women now beginning to put an iron roof on the house, and that benefits everybody.
But when you empower, as ADRA, this woman to go to the agricultural field to boost her yields, at the end of the day when she makes, you know, some sales after harvest, the man is the one going to sell all the proceeds. That's the latest we are getting right here at NTV Uganda, that the men are selling the proceeds and it's the women that are toiling at the agricultural fields. Largely, how true is this statement?
Yeah, I think that has been a problem, but with the empowerment now, with men and women being oriented. Actually, this program we are talking about is for orientation, of people to say, okay, this is how things used to happen, but look,
we need a social change.
Yes, this is where this has brought us. We need a social change. And so now we are talking about actually rewarding men and women that are working together, families that are working together. We are having a program where we are trying to say, okay, if a man and a woman, husband and wife, are working together, that's a model. And we are rewarding them with activities and inputs to actually do better in their gardens, do better in their businesses. And these are being amplified also by the local leaders. So it's a social change. It's an orientation program that we are on. Indeed.
How did the COVID-19 lockdown on education or the clampdown on our education system affect the girls within the northern region, especially Pade, Agagon, Kitgum?
Yeah, just like the rest of the communities in Uganda that have been affected. And for sure, for them, being in school is a safeguard.
I see.
Now, without being in school, and not so much happening in the community, meant that they're actually more susceptible to teenage pregnancies and all these programming challenges. So what we have done is to keep the communities engaged through the organized groups that we talked about. The communities, they keep engaged in activities, and also their children now, they are also working in these gardens that are being supported by the program. It was amazing to see school feeding program continuing to impact society even when schools were closed.
I see.
The parents continued to go to the same garden, grow the food, and this time distribute the food among the parents that are participating in this planting. And that was amazing, how a program remains connected with the people.
I see.
That's how we are looking at development. People must be in charge of their own lives.
But of course, James Bisheko, when schools were shut down, we did see so many of our learners across the country suffer. But then some were able to actually, you know, make some make some ends meet. You understand, technological advancement, learning online, continued learning. But for the people in northern Uganda, how largely were they able to get online and continue their education? How many were able to access the reading materials that were being distributed by the government? And how widespread is internet within this region to actually aid continued learning in that regard? Let's talk about that.
Where a small portion in the urban centers, parents who are affluent were able to continue supporting their children with these facilities, but our assessment shows that close to 80% of the children could not continue and use that technology to continue. So what happened is, okay, how do we now bring them back into the community to be engaged, because redundancy has been the problem. And that's why I'm saying that through the CBOs, the community-based organizations, and the sensitization programs that continued with the local leaders, and the groups are actually managed by the parents, they are able to keep the children engaged. But as it was for the rest of the country, certainly not all people were able to remain intact. There are some children, our reports show, who actually are likely not to come back to school.
And some have forgotten everything they learned in the last 2 years. They've forgotten to even count from 1 to 100.
Yeah, that's
what I've been looking at, according to some of the literature we've been reading. That's how terrible it is. And of course, you were telling me in 2019, before the pandemic hit, 42% of these young children within northern Uganda were not in school. Do you envisage a situation whereby we were open on January 10th, and even the percentage is bigger, owed to the COVID-19 pandemic, the number of children who might not get back to the school system?
We do hope that our efforts and those of other partners and government will help. The last 2 months, for example, we have been concentrating on remobilizing the community to prepare them for the new term, as we have been promised that it's like it open. So it will be an ongoing process, but also the programming in COVID-19 is now part and parcel of our activities. So we will continue to do all this to make sure that as many as is possible are afforded access to education, regardless of the situation that is pertaining.
How are you handling the issue of counseling and mentoring of both the learners and the teachers to actually aid them, and get them ready for the school reopening?
Well, in our program, we do have psychologists who are working with parent-teacher associations, and then they also go in schools where we have school clubs. The children are organized in school clubs that are being engaged in these kind of activities, including talking about sexual-related issues, for example, to avoid early pregnancies and so forth. So we are boosting that area of psychosocial support, and also working with the local leaders, work with the cultural and religious leaders. They have been very helpful in empowering communities to look at things differently.
Indeed.
And we think this is an area we will continue to emphasize as schools open, to make sure that both parents and children are on the level to get started with the school program.
The issue of the stray animals has also been mentioned in your report. How are you handling that? They're destroying people's gardens.
Yeah. Now that's another one. The community-based organizations, they put up their own rules within their communities.
Indeed.
And that's the power now of advocacy. Because our triangle of change talks about capacity building, talks about advocacy, and talks about direct service delivery. So on the side of advocacy, the community, when they identify that this has been an issue that is affecting our development, they work together and engage government. And government is putting up bylaws, for example, to say if somebody is rearing animals and is not able to actually take care of them, the government now takes responsibility. Okay, you have to pay damage to the gardens that have been affected. But of course, that creates also enmity within the community. Now, what we are doing is fencing off the communities which are into farming and the school gardens. They are now also having the responsibility to fence off the gardens. So
of course,
really they handle their challenges.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a responsibility of the community. Like I said, we do not really want to give people the fish.
Indeed.
we want
You have
to
to give
teach them
the tools to
how
go and fish.
Yeah, how to do the fishing themselves.
Yeah.
And also to show them they can discover the lake in their own community. So most of these challenges, when they come, we help the community to discuss them and dialogue. They engage with duty bearers, and then they are able to come up with solutions. That is a problem that has been there before, but is coming down because now people are on talking terms.
Indeed. James, as we clamour for the full reopening on January 10th, what are some of the concerns of the parents, the teachers, and even the learners themselves?
Yeah, the biggest challenge now that has been raised is, okay, how are we going to support our children in school when our sources of finance have been affected by COVID-19? And that's an ongoing concern. The communities are discussing this, and we are looking at our programming having now to do a little bit more to boost in this area, especially for the communities we are working with. Engage them on how to utilize the resources that they do have in their communities, and also to engage with the schools to accept that children can, for example, get started, and then maybe they can pay slowly by slowly as the program goes on. Remember, they are engaged through school management committees as CBOs, and they're also engaging the parent-teacher associations, and it's kind of like a community that is talking together. And we think that will help also with the schools.
James, to some of those parents that might be incapacitated to cough all these school fees in its entirety, because we do know, as is the norm in Uganda, every school term, schools will say, please, first pay 100% of all the school fees before you even let your learner come in. It is going to happen, even though government pushes back. It happens all the time. So shall you be offering some kind of reprieve to such incapacitated parents, offering them maybe bursaries, some kind of incentives to them to help them pay this money? Because it is one thing to focus on a school feeding program, but what if no child comes into the school because of school fees? Whom are we going to be feeding in that regard? What is ADRA doing?
Yeah, we do have some sponsorship programs, but they are not for everybody, because sponsorship is one of the most challenging programs that are hard to sustain. But we do have sponsorship programs for some communities, like the Batwa people in Kisoro, for example. We do have even supporting schools that are supporting them. But in this regard, in Acholi sub-region, our focus is on enabling communities to talk together, institutions to work together, and we do believe that there is going to be a solution around this area as well, especially if they are afforded time to be able to deliver. One of the challenges certainly that has been there has been the school feeding program. School feeding program also helps schools to increase enrollment. When they increase enrollment, they are able actually to make their ends meet at the end of the day. So it's a win-win situation, especially for these communities that we are working with. But I think the talking point where government and many of us as civil society organizations are talking is to say, what kind of accommodations are you going to make for our parents, especially in communities like this that have been affected before and the pandemic has just made it worse? What kind of accommodations are you going to make?
Let's also talk about another widespread problem within these three districts of Pade, Agago, and also Kitgum. There's also the problem, the low teacher to pupil ratio. Talk to us about that problem. How widespread is it in these three districts, and how is it affecting the education in this area?
That has been a problem, but we see that government is actually improving in that area.
To enroll more teachers? Yes,
enrolling more teachers, but also the parents getting involved. The parents getting involved, because there are some teachers who, for some reason, cannot be brought onto the payroll on time, and yet they need to be teaching. So through parent-teacher associations, they are able to actually encourage these teachers to continue working. The food we talked about is also shared with the teachers.
Are you sure?
Yes. So that they are motivated to actually stay in school as well. So it's kind of an ownership approach we are using, where we lobby and we teach the communities to lobby for teacher enrollment, and in some communities they have seen the number of teachers coming up because the community is talking. When they organize a baraza, for example, they call the district education officer to sit in, and the other DC is present as well. And as the community is talking, they are saying we have so many children but very few teachers. And some of the time we see that our children are not being taught. What is the problem? And so we have seen that actually enrollment is steadily growing but not matching the need as well. And so with the combination of the community getting involved and then the government knowing that these people are going to demand when the teacher leaves. One of the challenges, I worked in Karamoja before, one of the challenges was that these areas, they become recruiting centers. If a teacher wants to join government service, they will seek to go and work in Karamoja or in this hard-to-reach area where ADRA works most. And when they get onto the system, then they ask for a transfer. And that has been a challenge.
Indeed.
So you actually have the people coming in, but then they go as they come because it is a hard-to-reach area, hard-to-stay area.
Indeed.
So the school feeding program and the empowerment of the school management committees is improving the environment, and actually the teachers are choosing to stay.
And of course, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, many of the teachers are vacating the profession. High levels of teacher attrition have been noticed during this COVID-19 pandemic. Many become border men, others entered agriculture, others they started doing other menial jobs other than teaching because the schools were under lock and key. What measures are you putting in place as ADRA to ensure that we bring back all these teachers into the school system, or what advice are you giving to the government to alleviate this challenge?
Yeah, through our engagement with government and then the community is also monitoring what is going on.
Indeed.
We envisage that this is going to be a challenge as the schools open. There are no guarantees, so to say, but our engagement with government shows that they are very much aware. They are determined to make sure that schools are not suffocated with lack of teachers. We hope that it won't be that worse. But I think the environment is improving by and large. We are in talk with government, both at the local level but also at national level. We are hoping that this opening is going to be well arranged, mitigating these challenges. But for sure, no guarantees are provided on that.
James Bisheko, do you believe that the COVID-19 pandemic has undone totally all the gains we had achieved in these areas of northern Uganda, especially when it comes to alleviating the challenges of these people who have been distressed by over 2 decades of war, largely at the hands of the LRA? Yeah,
that's undeniably true that the efforts that have been put in, all this achievement, certainly COVID-19 having affected everybody, it is worse in that area. And so we are hoping that there is going to be some affirmative action and attention for these particular communities that are really worse off than the rest of them. And the point we are talking about of teachers is very, very important. Because in the urban centers, for example, there will be more motivations because there are more private schools and everybody is in the eye of the government. We will hope that this dialogue, the advocacy...
In the urban areas, everyone is in the eye of the government. It's more like James Bishoko is saying the people in the rural areas have been forgotten by the government.
I should say that
people in the
that's why we thank NTV for bringing us to this kind of level to bring out these issues.
It's our corporate social responsibility.
Yeah, but we do believe that much of the time, even the media is focused on the urban centers.
Indeed.
We are hoping that there's going to be this kind of affirmative action, and ADRA is committed to playing its part in this area.
I see.
Yeah.
So, in that regard, James Bisheko, what kind of change do you want to see affected within the northern region as far as alleviating the challenges of these citizens is concerned, especially those that have been suffering 20 years of war?
I have been privileged to work with communities for the last 18 years.
Indeed.
Having worked in the West and worked in Karamoja for about 4 years, and then I've been supervising and visiting the North quite substantively. I think education is going to remain an area that needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
Because it's going to take the people from these areas to develop these areas.
Thank you.
And that's why our effort and focus is on building their capacity.
And it starts with educating the girl child.
Educating the girl child is important because we have seen most young men will run away from the rural areas. and they are going to go and look for borders to ride and this kind of thing. So the bulk of the people and the responsibility to develop communities seem to ride with the women and girls, if you want.
And in worse scenarios, before this young man leaves this rural area to run to Kampala, he's leaving a child behind and a young mother who is only 16.
That's for sure. So an educated woman...
Intergenerational cycles of poverty.
Yes, an educated woman is going to be more effective in building society.
Indeed.
And engaging government as well, because that's where now also the issue is.
Indeed.
But also health, access to health, because human capital requires that we are healthy in order to be able to deliver. So again, it brings me to the other point. Livelihoods, education, and health. That's an area that we need to be looking at if people are going to get better. We have also seen an issue, for example, like the nodding disease. We've been doing some emergence in that area, but it has affected families and their capacity to actually produce and be productive because they
most of the money is spent on health-related
Much of the money is spent on that and taking care of the sick people, including presence. And that's important. So access to health, livelihoods and education is key to empower communities. But at the end of the day, we have got to work with the people on ground to be in charge of their own development because they have been used to relief for 20 years, so to say. Now it's time to build the communities by giving them the skills and also inputs where it is possible.
Well, of course, in the last 20 years, when it was always a song to talk about psychosocial support for the people within northern Uganda, we are in the COVID-19 pandemic and we're still talking about it as a recommendation, not as something that should be a must in northern Uganda. If we failed in the last 20 or so years, Mr. Bisheko, what should be done right now to make this a reality? Access to cheap health and quality health.
Quality is being addressed through the program, at least partly through the program we are having, where the people are able to challenge the systems.
The system.
And they are engaging district
So ADRA will not challenge the system on its own. It will empower CBOs working in that space so that they challenge the government.
It's really this woman who needs the service that knows what she needs. It's possible for us to look at things from one direction.
Yes.
But the people who really feel the challenge, they are more placed to actually engage. And so for them to...
So you empower the organizations to speak on their behalf. To
be able to identify. Like I talked about those 2 health centers that have been constructed because the people asked. And roads have been opened to reach these health centers. So that kind of dialogue, that kind of build-up is what is necessary for people to access quality services. At the end of the day, they are able to say, okay, we go to that health center, but there is no medicine.
Indeed.
And so now they are able to identify who is the duty bearer. If there is no medicine at health center, who do we ask?
I see.
And they have already identified, we need to talk to the DHO, we need to talk to the RDC, and this will help us to address this. Now we are able to invite the RDC to our community. A CBO has discovered they have capacity to invite the RDC to their community and speak to them.
So in a nutshell, ADRA is boosting service delivery through the empowerment of advocacy through these local CBOs. That is amazing work that you are doing. But the farmers are also grappling. Climate change.
Yeah,
it is battering them left, right, and center. What is ADRA doing to help them in this unpredictable season? Yeah,
climate change has come to really shape our thinking.
Indeed.
Reshape our thinking, so to say. And so climate change adaptation is a mainstreamed program in all our areas of work. Whether we are dealing with health, we are dealing with emergency response, we are able to include activities related to climate change. And so tree planting, for example, has been part and parcel. Even in the school feeding program, we are working with the schools to make sure they are able to improve the greening of the environment. And the communities are now looking at it more or less like, okay, this is good for us, because they have got to appreciate it in the first place. And so all our programs, we make sure we talk about climate change and how it is affecting us. Seasons have changed, and the community is able to identify that. And we're saying it's okay. So how are we going to go about it? If seasons have changed, how are we going to go about it? The water bodies are drying up. Some of the streams that they used to have are drying up. How do they address, and how does that impact their capacity to survive and be productive? So this is an area that I think people are coming to terms with.
Indeed.
But of course, that becomes even a bigger challenge for communities like we are working with, which need to survive, but at the same time take care of the environment.
Indeed.
So this is an area that it is an area of focus for us in all our programming activities across the country and the globe.
And of course, many of our farmers within the northern region are also complaining about the price fluctuations. They keep changing, and it's a major, major problem within this region. Talk to us about that, price fluctuations.
Price fluctuations are certainly, we know they are driven by several factors, and climate change is one of them.
And COVID-19?
COVID-19 has affected production in one area and increased demand on another.
I'm the only person with a commodity, so I start to sell it at my own price.
Yeah, certainly, certainly.
Yeah.
But what we are doing with the farmers right now, we have an approach called the Farmer Market School.
Farmer Market School?
Yes.
What's it about?
It's an approach that empowers the farmer to only go to the garden to plant something if they are sure it has market.
I see.
And if they are also sure that it is going to have value and they are going to add value to it and they get more return on their investment.
Ideally, before you go to the farm, do some research.
Yes, and the farmers are now being organized to go to the market, literally the market, visit these market centers, these supermarkets, if you want, and they see what is on the shelves, what is trending, and they're able to produce that. And government has also come up with a digital platform where you can easily see how prices are fluctuating. So, of course, our concern is on the farmer, is on the local person, and most of our people are involved in agriculture. So how do you make sure that these fluctuations are not going to affect their household incomes? And so they must be on the forefront to know how things are moving, and they are able to produce what is on the market, so that they don't produce this much of something that is not on the market, and their incomes and capacity to sustain their children in school is affected, or even to afford going to the health center. All
right. At the moment, the Adventist Development and Relief Agency is in Kitgum, Agago, and Pader. Where else are you going?
Thank you. Currently, we are operating in about 16 districts.
I see.
Very actively, and in others we do emergency response as challenges come. We are in Karamoja. We are doing food security there too, and we are promoting education and health as well. Again, working through the CBOs, as we talked about, and schools.
Indeed.
We are also in West Nile. West Nile is mainly emergency response, particularly in Yumbe and also Moyo and Arua. That one is those are emergency activities, and there we are supported by Norway.
I see.
Through ADRA Norway. In Karamoja we are supported by Danida through ADRA Denmark.
Indeed. And
then we are having operations for food distribution and cash distribution for food. It's General Food Assistance Program with WFP in Chaka and Wamwanja, Chegego and Kamwenge districts, so to say.
Of course, the food rations are reducing within the refugee settlements. They're also complaining. Many of the parents, yes, are forced to actually sell off their young children into prostitution to cover the gap of the food rations. That's how debilitating the situation is. Of course, talk to me about that before we get back to northern Uganda. Yeah,
sure. There has been a global, of course, impact on resource envelope.
Indeed.
For everyone. And so the refugees are also affected. So we have had to cut on the rations up to 60%.
Wow.
In some areas, and also having to come to terms with this change as an issue. It affects operation capacity. It also affects what goes to the community as well. But ADRA, working in partnership with various support offices in like I said, we are in 118 countries.
Indeed.
So we have those which mobilize resources. Like I've talked about Sweden, for example, is the one supporting the SCALE program in Pader, Agago, and Kitgum. And then we have Portugal, we have Norway, we do have Austria,
I see.
we have Portugal, Poland, and Slovakia. And currently we're also having ADRA Canada coming with a program for reproductive health and rights.
NTV Uganda needs to be part of that. We are large on sexual reproductive health and information. Indeed.
Yes, that is a program is going to run for 6 years.
I see.
Yes.
So in the year 2022, what shall be the main point of advocacy for the Adventist Development and Relief Agency?
Our focus is going to be on social change, and we are looking at sexual rights, health and rights, looking at the girl child, as we are talking about, or the young people. And that, again, as you know, the North has been affected, having been in war, and now they have come out of war. To adapt to the new life has been an issue. So that is going to be a focus for us. But we also
some of them have been in lockdown for the last 20 years.
That's true.
Indeed.
That's true. While we are experiencing it now,
for only 2 years.
All their life they have been in lockdown.
I see what you mean.
While they were coming out, then they came this time.
Indeed.
And so we're also going to continue to focus on livelihood enhancement.
I see.
Supporting communities to actually earn a living and be able to sustain their own lives and the lives of those they support. And then, of course, we are going to continue to support education, and we will remain with a big focus on Karamoja. A big focus on Acholi sub-region is going to stay. Of course, West Nile and all refugee hosting communities are going to remain our focus, as there is an impact there. And then we work with the Batwa people in the southwest.
I see.
The Batwa are a big focus for us too. And then finally, we are moving to Kasese. Kasese has been affected greatly also by challenges of instability and social issues. So it's going to be another area we're going to be, Rwenzori region, so to say.
Have any of the community-based organizations you've been working with in the areas of Agago, Kitgum, and Pader come to you about this major problem of the tax on the internet, the 12% tax on data? Have they ever come to you and mentioned that, you know what, this is one of the biggest challenges that we've actually discovered to be hampering the issue of continued learning?
Some of the youth groups in Karamoja, yes.
I see. Do you think it's a double standard on the part of the government? The fact that they want people to study online, but they are the same people putting a tax on the internet.
Well, we are hoping that this will change with time.
But is it a double standard?
I am not sure if I would say it that way, because it affects us all. We are hoping that it's going to continue to be important to look at how to use technology to improve our service delivery.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right. Your last talking point or parting shots to the powers that be, the duty bearers, to the community-based organizations, to the learners, to the teachers, and the parents alike, before I let you go.
Yeah, I would like to thank NTV for the opportunity they have given us.
Indeed.
And I want to thank ADRA and the leadership for the support they continue to give. The government of Uganda has been very supportive, from central to local governments. And then, of course, our donors, I just talked about Danida has been very supportive. SIDA, Norway has been very supportive. Now Canada has come in, Austria, Portugal, Slovakia, and other areas of support. The UN agencies, UNHCR, FAO is supporting our programs in Karamoja too. I'd like to thank those, but most importantly, I would like to thank the community-based organizations and the people, the religious leaders on ground, and the parents and the teachers that have been working with us, not only in Acholi sub-region, but all over Uganda, for the change that we have seen coming through over the years. And we are still together. We hope that 2022 is going to be a better year for our programming. And
of course, speaking of 2022, what kind of help do you need from the government, Mr. Bisheko?
Yeah, we need to continue to see a working environment for civil society, where ADRA plays a role.
Although, of course, 54 NGOs were shut down in August. Well, of course.
Yeah, we have been seeing a lot of support in that area, but also we do hope that there's going to continue to be support for communities that are most affected.
Indeed.
Talk about COVID-19.
All right. That is Mr. James Bisheko, the livelihood officer working for the Adventist Development and Relief Agency, Uganda. Thank you very much, James Bisheko, for coming through and talking to us about this very important subject.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, NTV.
Indeed.
And our viewers.
And indeed, thank you too for, keeping it locked on NTV Uganda. It's around 11:55 a.m. At around 1 p.m. NTV at 1 shall be taking center stage. Look out for NTV Sport at around 12:30 p.m. courtesy of Justin and Garuchiremo. Have yourselves a blessed day for now.